Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trek Before. This time, Booby Trap. Not sure if we can say that, but I just did. It's still an episode. Not Booty Trap, but we'll get into that. You'll hear us get into that in the episode of Booby Trap, and that's not a Booby Trap. Also not a Booby Trap. Patreon.com/IABD. Go there, support the network, support IABTB. That's It's All Been Trek Before. Support us there. It doesn't take much, and you get all the bonus content. So check us out there, and check this out. Yeah, I'm saying it. It's a Booby Trap. Booby Trap on It's All Been Trek Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trek Before. Your regular hosts have returned.
This is Steven.
And Keith.
Jimmy-Jerome. We're trapped here as much as we tried to escape this podcast to talk about Booby Trap. First impressions.
I just realized I wrote down Booty Trap again. On my
Either way.
sheet. Yeah.
Booby or booty. Whatever.
It was fine. I didn't love it, but I certainly didn't hate it. I didn't get super bored or anything with it. So I thought there was enough interesting things going on that it kept me in. I didn't take a ton of notes, and that's not necessarily a good or bad thing for it. But yeah, I thought it was fine.
Yeah, also not a ton of notes. They had some things working for and against it, certainly. But by the end, that I really appreciated the way that the problem unfolded, or rather the solution of it. I thought that everything was, they were thorough in a way that I'm not used to seeing. So I'll say that.
I liked this episode, though I'm having a hard time as I glance at my notes thinking about why I liked it.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing to dislike about it. So, well,
Right.
There is, but not a ton.
I can
But I
guess.
actually took a lot of notes. So we'll jump right in here. We open with Geordi on the beach drinking Cocoa No-Nos. Christy that's what he called him. With Christy Henshaw, played by Julie Warner. You may recognize her from Tommy Boy, Doc Hollywood.
Yeah.
She was a movie actress in the 90s.
I recognized her right away. Yeah.
I couldn't place her, but I knew I'd seen her.
Yeah.
I had to look it up, but
I thought she'd been in even more than she was, but once there was Tommy Boy was in there, and a couple of the others you just mentioned. I was like, oh, okay, that is her.
Yeah.
I don't know why
That was one of her earliest credits, and she actually will reprise the role, Christy Henshaw, in an upcoming episode. It says she's credited 2 episodes
Oh,
here.
all right. Well, I'm looking forward to that.
At the end of this season.
I thought her being there was a perfect start to an episode called Booby Trap. Also, and before we get too far ahead, this might get a little too far ahead, but is having it called Booby Trap a spoiler?
I wrote the exact same thing.
And watching it in real time, would you have noticed the title was Booby Trap? Watching it in 1989.
Oh.
I think so, because they do a whole title card on the screen.
Yeah, like right when they're looking at the ship, it's like Booby Trap right on it. So
right
it's like,
after
So to me, then it was like, oh, they're going to run into a booby trap.
I mean, you could have thought it was about Geordi's. You could have thought it was about Geordi's story.
Yeah.
Although that would have been very inappropriate for 1989 broadcast television.
that joke kept coming up for me, certainly, of course, during the opening. But also, the spoiler thing. I was kind of joking when I wrote that down, but thinking back, or putting myself in that place, that would have been kind of.
I mean, I think it's okay they spoiled it because the trap sprung relatively early. So
it's true.
I mean, it's what the episode's about. But I do have a little more on that Geordi opening scene. I mean, him snapping for the violin was just obnoxious.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought the whole scene, he was portraying himself very poorly. As we know, Geordi is terrible with women, but like this was especially bad.
Yeah.
But the thing the line that really bothered me was when she said, "Oh, I've had enough to drink already," and he's like, "Oh yeah, me too." And I'm like, "Who has enough to drink laying on the beach?" You don't say no. I don't care if they're called no-nos. They become yes-yeses.
Damn. I was gonna say, why didn't she say no? Well, and I guess I know why she didn't, but still, it's
I think
a missed opportunity.
The arm around the shoulder is going to be a tough move anytime on a beach when you're just sitting there.
And it could not have been more clear she was uninterested.
Yeah.
She was sending every signal. He was not getting it at all.
If it had been Three's Company, no would have worked, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just not a fan of that opening scene.
Yeah, and I think the rest of the episode, and I'll get into this later, is more starkly contrasted with that, because instead of it just being, well, he's just not smooth or good, it's just like he's embarrassingly bad. It's almost like the Riker a couple weeks ago, stumbling around with the body, which I love. It's like a Jerry Lewis movie. This just didn't play. It was just like No, Geordi is a nerd, but he's not from Revenge of the Nerds, and shouldn't be that over the top. And I thought the rest of the episode dealt with it a lot better than this, but this was not a good start. I agree with you, Jimmy.
So I don't know. I mean, I don't think that I had noticed him being bad with women until this episode. I remember that Jimmy alluded to something cringeworthy happening with him, but I didn't know. I mean, when we got here, I was like, oh, this must be what he was remembering him to be like.
Well, we jumped from that opening scene to Wesley and Data playing chess with the asteroid field. Well, I guess it's a wreckage field in the backdrop, which I thought was a really cool shot. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I thought I really liked the wreckage field, but do you guys think it was too clean? Like the effect shot was great, but do you think there should be more smaller particles and whatever? And the scene later where the Enterprise goes through it, for syndicated television wasn't bad. Well, we're talking about the Star Wars where you're talking about multi-million-dollar movies. I thought it was okay, but I would have liked a little more silt, I guess, for lack of a better term.
I would have liked starship debris instead of just rocks.
Yes, yeah.
Well, I mean, it could be argued that the reason why it looked a little too clean was because the whole field was designed as a trap, and maybe there was something about the way it was arranged that was...
a whole field that in 1,000 years only trapped 2 starship.
Yeah.
Well, somebody should have said, this looks really good, almost too good. It's a trap.
We needed Admiral Akbar to be Lieutenant Akbar at the back of the bridge going, it's a trap.
No, that's a good point, though, Jimmy, about...
It's a booby trap.
For that having been there for so long, either you would have expected more ships to have been trapped, or...
Well, it was a lot of effort built during a war. You'd expect more derelicts, like, from that war. Yeah. I buy that there's not a bunch of modern ships, but I would expect more of the original.
Do you think that was something, just an oversight in the writing, or something that they avoided because it would have made it seem weird for them to fall for it if there had been more ships?
I'm thinking budgetary. Because they said it was a debris field. I would still see them flying in even if there were the wreckage of a bunch of ships from that era, because they had a space battle there and they all died. I would get that. And then maybe there's that one ship that's not destroyed, and that's weird. Let's go check that one out.
Okay.
Picard sees it, and Professor Jean-Luc Jones says that ship belongs in a museum. Immediately thought Indiana Jones. I do like the concept that this is an ancient race that over 1,000 years ago fought to mutual extinction with another race. I like that future history, even though it was before our time. I mean, they make the point.
Right.
Picard's like, we were just inventing mechanical clocks.
I really like that too. I had to do the math, but I like that too.
It's cool when they reference that there were other races out in the stars before us. There were other spacefaring empires.
Yep.
I liked the talk about ships and bottles, and Worf and Data. Worf like, I didn't play with toys, and then Data's like, well, I was never a boy. Like, that was just such a good, funny exchange.
Riker once again, very early on, is like, that's impossible. I feel like if you went to the academy, somewhere there on a wall was written, there are always possibilities, Spock used to always say. So I don't think anybody, especially if you're on the Enterprise and you're out there on that mission, out there seeking out new worlds and everything, nothing is impossible. You should never say that's impossible.
So you're saying there are motivational posters like the cat hanging there?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's Spock just with an eyebrow raised. Yeah, it's a picture. Anyway.
So the next scene we had was Geordi whining to Guinan. And I don't know if it's because I related to Geordi, like when I was in my early 20s, feeling and probably talking the same way, but I really hated him in that moment. And yet I liked Guinan so much in that scene that it made up for it. Although I do want to know, when she was talking about a bald man that took care of her and she's attracted to bald men, she was talking about Picard, right?
Perhaps.
Right. I had the same
We can agree that Picard and Guinan totally hooked up and dated for a while.
Yeah, and I thought Geordi started to make a comeback there, but initially he is still kind of every guy who's like, oh, it didn't go well kind of a thing. And then he starts to come around because Guinan is undefeated. She's the best. And
she made the great point of, you're not trying with me. And then my follow-up to that is, why aren't you trying with Guinan? What is wrong with you?
Which is what I thought she was kind of alluding to, like, you're not trying. Thanks a lot, jerk.
Oh, that's not. I didn't think any resentment on her part, but I just wanted to know why he wasn't.
Yeah,
I mean,
it doesn't make any sense.
Jordy couldn't do any better than Guinan. I'm just saying.
Right. Yeah. And
if they didn't have the Picard Crusher thing, I would still be shipping Picard and Guinan.
She's undefeated. One, she's Guinan. Two, she's a bartender. And I wrote down Jeremy at the V is also undefeated. He always has great advice, one way or another for me. So, but yeah, it was great to see her again.
The way that she comes across is kind of matronly a lot of the time because of the advice and so on, and the unknowable age.
Years old.
Yeah. Secondly, this kind of goes into one of the other things I was going to say about Geordi and just the way that he's presented. I mean, some of it may just be that LeVar Burton himself isn't used to being cast in that kind of like romantic lead kind of thing.
Yeah.
Some of it, I think, is the time period. I don't think that they were writing parts like that for people of color generally. It was still edgy, I think, even then to show an interracial kiss, which I kind of was surprised at by the end of that, albeit a very, a very.
Well, I mean, Star Trek: The Original Series broke that barrier decades before.
Kind of, but yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of my point. Is that even in the intervening time, it wasn't certainly like the floodgates just opened. It's like, sure, let's go for it. The amount of trouble they had to go through at that time really didn't change that much by then. But also,
to be honest, that was something I didn't think twice about in the next gen. Whereas in the original, it was something I paid attention to. I don't know why.
But we don't really feel it the same way now as we would. I mean, it's hard to put yourself in the mindset of that, certainly.
Well, I think to me, and maybe this is just my privileged upbringing, but I feel like to me that always felt like it was something of the past. And so original series to me is the past, like before my time. Whereas next gen, I was around. That was kind of contemporary to me. So maybe that's why I didn't bump on it. Even though I think you're right, Keith. I think in that time on television, this is just me forgetting,
Yeah.
Well, obviously, it is something that I've been acutely aware of for my entire life. As those things are going on. So, by contrast, and this is going more toward the writing, and of course, LeVar Burton and the types of roles he would have gotten, or the comfort level he would have had with that, or just contemporary writing. I started thinking of a more contemporary analog to that would be Scott. What's his name on the Orville?
Scott Grimes?
Yeah, Scott Grimes. The type of character, you could easily see a Scott Grimes going through this, and it is kind of played off in a much more comedic way, or a much more, so he's, you don't feel as sorry for him because it doesn't, there's that kind of character that's supposed to be like the comic relief or the guy who can take a few romantic shots and miss, and it feels like it doesn't land that heavily. Whereas we have a character like Geordi who we didn't really, I think a lot of it is that he wasn't characterized that much in the earlier seasons.
I don't think he was characterized that much through the run of Next Gen. I feel like he's one of the he and Dr. Crusher are like the criminally underused cast members.
Right. So when you try to jump to something like this, it just feels so awkward. Like you suddenly have to think of this person as a fleshed out sexual being, and it kind of goes, so
nobody wants to think of Geordi that way.
Right, and that's I think that's unfair, but that's the way they wrote him.
Because LeVar Burton's awesome.
I think we'll do more retrospectives on LeVar Burton's career. Even during the time, I know like people like Roger Ebert and some other folks were like, LeVar Burton should have been like a movie star or a bigger star than he was. I mean, he's an iconic person. He was in Roots. He was Kunta Kinte. He was
reading Rainbow.
He was reading Rainbow.
Yeah,
he's an iconic guy. The guy who just shows up on a Community episode, and I lose my. Yeah. So he's iconic, and he's on top of that. He seems like just the greatest person in the world. You want to hang out with. His career should have been even bigger. He should have been after Roots. He should have been a movie star, man. He should have been in movie. He should have been a bigger star. And whether there's some of that choices he made as well, I don't know that well, but I do know at that time people were like, how is this guy not getting larger roles? And he just wasn't, and that was. Hollywood sucked then, and it's gotten better since. But obviously we haven't defeated injustice anywhere.
There was a movie in the 80s.
Yeah, we have. This we're well into the Biden presidency.
By the time this podcast airs.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Keith, you were saying.
Yeah.
No, just sorry. Around that time, and I can barely remember the movie right now, but the Hollywood Shuffle. I don't know if you're familiar with that. That dealt with the concept of that is just you don't get parts like that written for Black people at the time. I mean, took a long time to get to the point there. I mean, on contemporary television right now, I think one of the few channels that has gotten it right, oddly enough, however you feel about the shows themselves, it would be the CW. If you watch like any of the superhero shows, POC casting across the board, even like the Vampire Diaries and so forth, they would put them in lead roles, lead romantic roles, heroes, villains. It wasn't about casting as being these stereotypes. They're just characters, regular characters that you can look up to in various ways, and that's just it. It was, and they managed to do it without making a big deal out of it. It normalized the idea of multicultural casting, which I really appreciate. So I'll say that.
I think it was Friends because of all the black people on Friends.
So there's Aisha Tyler. And everybody. It's like simultaneously Aisha Tyler.
Aisha Tyler, and she was the only black person in New York City at that time, though, right?
Yeah, they're close enough.
Well, yeah, because Seinfeld. I should have sent this to you guys. There was a really great article about Seinfeld and how it treated people of color, because it didn't get great marks either. But the point of this article was whenever a person of color showed up, they were pointing out what idiots. The people were like, that's not how you act in society. This is not how we act.
Yeah, they're there to make everything, get them in trouble. They're stumbling blocks.
They made the further point, and they referenced Friends as well, that they weren't absolving either show of just making New York white, but they went more with this is the idealized Disneyification of Times Square version of New York, which we see lots of times. Which
thank goodness. But anyway, when we got to Will and Grace, we were past that.
Oh man!
Because of all the black cast members of Will and Grace, there was
Sigh.
Didn't Wanda Sykes guest star at some point?
So you're getting back to the Starship, though.
Yeah.
The point is things haven't improved that much by that time in behind the scenes. I don't know if I mean, obviously you two would have been likelier to have seen interviews or whatever, or heard of them talk about this sort of thing. I don't know if the cast members brought up their being. The first season one, the one that was like one of the bottom ones.
Code of Honor?
Yeah, Code of Honor. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, everybody certainly bumped on that. They're able to call out this is that. But I think that was also a sign of the times that other things like other oversights probably wouldn't have occurred to them.
Speaking of actors of color, though, we had our alien of the week, Gallic Dar, played by black actor Albert Hall, who's got a ton of credits. He's best known for Apocalypse Now, Malcolm X, Major Pain. He did an arc on Men of a Certain Age, Ally McBeal.
He's the chief in Apocalypse Now.
Very small role for him, but I thought he was effective in it. I will say it was weird to me that Picard was so excited to go over to that ship. All pumped. He gets over there. He watches one tape from a captain standing in one room and goes, okay, I'm done now. I think we've seen all there is to see. I'm like, whoa, wait. No, you should be wanting to spend days over there poring over every inch. You've seen all. That felt like crappy writing of expediency of moving the story along.
I'll give you that. It felt sort of like that moment took the wind out of his sails, maybe, and I guess that I could see it, making him kind of sad about it. But once he gets back over to the Enterprise, he's kind of
excited.
Oh yeah, this was the greatest thing ever that happened.
Yeah.
So
this episode has 2 story by credits and 3 teleplay by credits, which could tell you about some of the messiness. It was written by Ron Roman, who only has 2 writing credits. This and an episode of Give Me a Break. It was a television series earlier in the 80s.
Yeah. Which I recall, actually. But
you do?
Yeah.
I used to watch when I was a kid. It was on.
Oh. Well, Ron Roman is the one that did both story by and teleplay by. He's the crossover there. He story by him and Michael Wagner, who I'm not so familiar with, but he was a writer on Hill Street Blues. Not that many credits. He did write, this was his 3rd episode of Next Gen. He wrote The Survivors, The Uxbridges, and he wrote our season premiere, Evolution. So he wrote 3 episodes here right at the beginning. Not bad episodes, but not like standout great episodes, I think. Yeah. And then the teleplay was by Ron along with Richard Donis. He only wrote 1 other episode of Next Gen, Deja Q. But he was an executive story editor for a while.
Oh my God.
And wrote a couple episodes.
I already love it.
And Michael
it's gonna be
Piller.
between that and Menage a Troy already for me. Sorry.
And the final teleplay by was Michael Piller, who was one of the big exec producers on Voyager. He also wrote for DS9. He wrote the movie Star Trek Insurrection. So he's a big Star Trek guy that's around for a while. He co-created Voyager and DS9. Big guy. My guess is he was just tasked with cleaning up this episode, but who knows? I mean, this other Evolution was his first teleplay by credit, the season premiere this year. But after this, he helped Ron Moore write The Best of Both Worlds, Part 1 and 2. Michael Piller will also write Unification, Part 1 and 2, which are the Spock episodes. So some heavy hitters cleaning up, some not so heavy hitters.
Yeah. To go back a sec, when they play those tapes, they use the old messages to retrieve, they use the tricorder. Is the tricorder the ultimate cell phone that's not a phone?
It's a sonic screwdriver, basically.
I was just thinking sonic screwdriver.
Yes. Because
it's whatever you need for the scene.
Yeah.
How could you transfer? Yeah, right. So thinking transferring power from it in some way.
I'm not going to try to defend it.
I like the look of the tricorders on TNG. The TOS ones are very much like, that's an awesome tape recorder. Picard says scheduled again this week. He said
yes,
scheduled for retrieval, and then he says the title of the show. He says Booby Trap. Actually, everyone said Booby Trap.
Really? I thought it was just him.
One more note here before we jump into the next section of this episode. It was directed by Gabrielle Beaumont, television director. L.A. Law, Hill Street Blues, Remington Steele. She will direct 7 episodes of The Next Generation, starting with this one. And also an episode of Deep Space Nine and an episode of Voyager. So now we get to Leah Brahms. As soon as I saw the name, I got excited because Leah Brahms, despite only appearing in 2 episodes of The Next Generation, holds a very large place in the minds of a lot of fans.
Because of her performance or because of like the canon of what she's done?
I think it's the canon. She's certainly the closest thing Geordi ever gets to a real love interest in the series. But
well, no, I mean, by canon, I mean like because her role in designing the starship or because of...
No, not in designing the starship. Like I said, I think she's the closest thing Geordi ever gets to love interest. And so I think plenty of novels and discussions and stuff have included her, even though she was in the show so briefly. Also, I do think it was a good performance. Susan Gibney played her. Mm-hmm. Like I said, she will be in 2 episodes of Next Gen because Leah Brahms comes back next season. The real Leah Brahms, not the holodeck Leah Brahms, which I'll talk to here at the end a little bit more. And then she plays a character named Erica Bentine in a 2-part Deep Space Nine episode as well. A different character, but she gets 2 episodes of DS9. So, I thought she was wonderful.
Yeah, I agree. For me, just I love those moments when you have those on-screen character transformations. She was doing such a good job of doing the whole computer image thing, and then just that melting into a person suddenly.
Well, the voice was distinctive and noticeable, and then when she touched Geordi's shoulder and he turns around, it was very much like a, wow, okay. Yeah, I think you're right. I think her entrance and her transformation really helps sell the character as well in the minds of fans.
I really like her voice too. I mean, just the voiceover portions of.
We should have her on Radio Hour.
Yeah. I mean, when she's doing the narrating the diary entries and so forth, or however they were presented. You know what I'm saying? The manuals and specs.
She's just started so lackluster because we hear her name and then Geordi's like, oh, well, another woman that won't get personal with me. And
okay.
like, oh.
That was just over the line as far as, I mean, again, that was a very good, like, again, I can only remember the actor's name, Scott Grimes. I can see that kind of Steve Smith delivery of something. That kind of comic relief character could easily deliver that and it goes. But for here, it just feels so, oh, come on, Geordi.
Yeah. We did, though, almost immediately get a cool shot of a Galaxy-class ship under construction, whether it was the Enterprise D or another ship of its class. That was a really neat shot out the window of the saucer being half done and open framework. I thought it was a little weird. I excuse it for story purposes, but the holodeck just created her, and then she reaches out and touches him. I know they go through this logic thing where Geordi's like, well, I guess I did ask for that. But to me, it was like, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. Geordi... giving Leah a personality, though, like asking her to have that personality, immediately I'm thinking, okay, this is a mistake. This is not going to go well. And I would argue that it did not. And let me tell you why, because there were things that were occurring to me as this is all going on. Geordi has an entire engineering staff, and he's not bringing any of them into this.
Right.
He is in this little delusion love story between himself and a computer creation, and he has shut out everybody he should be leaning on for help, and that can help him. I'm not saying he couldn't have Leah Brahms, but he shouldn't be in there alone with Leah Brahms, not because of impropriety, but because he's not doing the best job he can do if he's not drawing on his team to help him in such a complicated, desperate situation.
I hadn't thought of that at all, and that's absolutely right. I mean, for something like that, it's probably unprofessional.
That
so
makes a lot of
unprofessional.
sense.
He's absent, MIA from engineering in the middle of an emergency.
That makes a lot of sense, Jimmy. And I think when the episode started, I thought the whole Geordi can't get a girl was going to be more of a B story. But the fact that we didn't like it and it's a setup for this makes what you're talking about even worse. It's like, I mean, let's say he's not shutting out and the other engineering people are working on it, but he's also working on it this way. And that makes this a little more organic. But we're already set up for, he's going to fall in love with his computer creation. It's already kind of set up. And we would call that now creepy.
So here's the thing. I've got a lot more notes about the creepiness of this.
Yeah.
But when this episode aired, and I'm pretty sure the first time I saw it, I thought this was a really sweet, touching story. And I think that's how this episode was regarded for decades.
Yeah. I
think it's only now that we're realizing just how creepy this episode was.
Oh, and I can tell you, if I'd have seen this in '89, I'd have felt that same way. Like, oh, good for Geordi.
Yes.
He's got a fake girlfriend.
But what really disturbs me now is without the real Leah Brahms' permission, he has created and flirted and fallen in love with a version of her, completely behind her back, with no consent. And that, to me, I'm like, why does the holodeck allow that? That is not cool at all.
See, I was going to praise the holodeck.
But again, I don't think that's anything.
I don't know about that.
I don't think that's anything I thought of earlier times seeing this episode, and I really liked this episode. A lot of people really liked this episode. So that, I think it's just recent events in the modern age changing the perspective on an episode that was intended to be a sweet love story. And
I guess I'm just so
was
torn about
successful
that.
Coming across that way for a long time.
I agree with all the points at the same time. It's just I don't know. I can see this still. One of the notes I wrote down was, is this any worse than say like Riker and Minuet?
I
think a lot of it is a perception of just the type of character. It feels weird coming from Geordi and under the circumstances. And
so here's the difference. Minuet was a completely fictional character. Leah Brahms is a real person. Yeah, that would be like if we had a VR headset that you could get down and dirty with, and there was a computer creation of a woman that is not real in any way, that's just a simulation for you to, have fun with in this simulation.
Right.
But instead of doing that, you pick one of your female friends you have a crush on and program her in instead without her.
No. That's much different than. But she's more of a public historical figure.
Okay,
it would have been like
Susan Sarandon.
So you put Susan Sarandon in. Is that appropriate?
Define appropriate. I mean, for what purpose?
I assure you, it would be inappropriate in every way.
Ask her about acting so you can learn how to act, but then at the same time you fall for her and start flirting and start making out.
That's right. The holodeck is there for. It would be inappropriate. No, wait. Let me finish. It would be inappropriate if you made this likeness of a real person and then videotaped yourself doing these inappropriate things and then published it as though it were the real person, as opposed to doing something in private with this construct. How does it affect the real person?
You don't think Susan Sarandon would be offended? I don't know her personally, so maybe she wouldn't. But there would definitely be some women offended to learn that you had done this.
Well, yes, that's the whole point, though. You wouldn't go and, hey, look at this thing I made of you that I'm doing these things with. The idea was that Geordi plugged in all these facts and data, and the computer simulated how the real woman might react with some margin of error. It wouldn't seem that far-fetched that they wouldn't get along or that she wouldn't, on the issue of whether or not a woman would be offended or consent or whatever. I mean, it all comes down to what the woman consents or decides that, yeah, sure. If she's offended, she's offended. But you can't say that this is necessarily the concept of making a fictional construct of someone that is real isn't offensive in and of itself. I think it's how it's presented to that person, how it's presented to the rest of the world, and how they find out. Yes, that can be offensive.
He did it to solve the problem initially, right? But
initially, Yeah.
But he obviously had a program to also.
Well, he added that because it wasn't very user friendly, but I think that
I'll
certainly.
say. Am I right?
I just think that was overstepping the bounds.
But certainly, I'm not going to say that wasn't in the back of his mind when he did it.
Sure.
The idea of being personally attracted to this construct and going, you know what, let's spice it up a little bit. But I think it was also for utilitarian purposes as well. It's not necessarily, they're mutually exclusive, I guess I would say.
I don't know. I'm just thinking of some of my female friends, and I think if I had done something similar with their likenesses, they would not be pleased.
Of course not, because they're just people you happen to know because of these other things. Yeah. The pre-existing familiarity injects something more into it than there would be if this is just some person you know of because of something they've done who you've never met.
Well, guys,
we're going to get to see the other side of that with Barclay when he programs people he knows and are on the ship into the holodeck.
I've been working on a COVID-19 vaccine with a holodeck version of Madame Curie. So
tell us how that goes, Stephen.
So far, she hates me. I tell you.
I'm so sorry.
It's something that 9%. If it had been the actual, if it had been 100%, you'd be fine.
I think it's mostly because she's speaking French. I don't know what she's saying to me. But I know she's not happy. The holodeck is actually helping a situation.
Yeah.
That amazed me. I was very happy.
This is what it's useful for. It's like the internet. Right. You can look at porn or you could research. Right. Riker uses it one way, Geordi uses it another, but then ends up, of course, in the middle of his research, switching over to Riker's version because he's in the holodeck.
At some point, I can't remember if it's Picard or whoever says, well, there's no way the computer can account for the human factor, but isn't that what was going on? I mean, isn't that what AI is? Isn't that?
Yeah.
So I know, again, that's 89 talk compared to 2020, but it's like, no, I think that's the whole idea.
Yeah, I think a modern remake of this episode would really get into the artificial intelligence aspect of it in a way that was glossed over.
Yeah. It got very Kirkian where it's like, oh, Picard knows what he's doing because he's a human, he's got emotion or whatever.
All the power starts to go out and the holodeck program shuts down. Geordi can't override that as the chief engineer. It seemed weird to me.
Was there an explanation for it? I kind of saw that. And
they just said he wasn't authorized, and then Picard had to turn it back on for him. And I felt very much like, as the chief engineer, he should have been authorized. Maybe
there's a problem with the HR. They didn't put all this stuff in when he got his promotion.
Or they just didn't trust Geordi with the holodeck. Did you notice in Leah's office there was a model of the original Constitution class Enterprise that had a nice foreground shot?
Yeah. She had some cool stuff in there.
Yeah, Kirk ship. When Picard walks in on Geordi and Leah, it felt to me like he had just walked in on Geordi masturbating.
They certainly played it that way, and it could have gone that way.
And Geordi tried to pretend that he wasn't doing anything, and Picard, for the sake of both their dignities, let him pretend. But yeah. When they're trying to conserve power, they keep shutting off lights everywhere. Mm-hmm. I'm like, how much power do lights really take? Because now lights don't take very much power. Is that really what you need to preserve power, that they have to sit in the dark conference room?
Well, that's a good point. I mean, it's the way that they would have thought of tech back then when they wrote it, but
and yet later in the episode, when they shut off all the systems except for the 2 thrusters and life support, they show an exterior shot of the Enterprise, and there's still a lot of lights on.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, you can have lights in the conference room, but now all of a sudden, when you shut down all systems, there's still lights everywhere.
So what the Enterprise
very consistent about how lights fit in with systems and energy.
What the Enterprise needs is everybody's dad or my wife shutting everyone's lights off.
Oh,
I do that too.
I'm the Colleen in this household, I believe. To be fair, even now, if you were to, let's say if you're defragmenting a hard drive or doing something where it's conserve space, or it would go through and go, okay, what are the non-essential things first, and just whether or not a light would be negligible in and of itself. They would start to add up over the ship if you could just start with non-essential things first.
Mm-hmm.
But they left a lot of lights on, so the senior officers being in the conference room aren't one of those essential things.
Maybe it's motion detection. They have to jump into
a lot of those lights you see from the outside are battery operated. So they're 15D batteries.
Enterprise D batteries.
Wow.
This episode had a terrible music sting right after the shields fail as they were going to commercial.
Oh, yeah. I missed it.
Oh, so bad. Geordi has an awfully low opinion of the computer when he's talking about. I mean, first of all, he wins the argument with the computer early on with Leah, which I thought was weird. But then Geordi, like, building on what Steven said about the human element, Picard ends up flying. Geordi's going to fly because he doesn't think the computer can handle it. I'm like, everyone should believe in the computer. It's the chief engineer of the starship, isn't it?
Yeah, because Scotty did.
With the Picard flying, though, I wrote down Picard's going to fly. Is he the most qualified? I mean, I guess you could take some angle of the chances of them making it out are kind of low, so he takes the guilt off of another crewman for failing if they fail. But at the same time, it's like, wouldn't you want your best pilot to be in control at the moment? Like, shouldn't Data be flying the ship?
Right, or if you're going with the whole human emotion instinct thing, wouldn't it be Riker? I mean, he's uber human. He's Mr. Braggadocio, so much emotion.
Have they ever really specified what Picard's piloting background is? It could be something that maybe he coming up through the
I think they mentioned he was a very good pilot at one point.
That could be it. I mean, they hinted at the idea, well, the whole ship in the bottle thing, that concept translated through, single propeller planes. The idea was that he is the historian and he would be the most it's not necessarily logical, but the perception was that he would be the most qualified to deal with arcane situations.
Obviously he was, because he did the slingshot when nobody else thought of it. He's experienced, so he has more experience.
That too.
And it's just nice to see Picard get a hero moment, so I'm not really complaining about that aspect. But
okay, well, just in case I was doing the devil's advocate thing for it, but I mean, I agree. I mean, I thought I liked the way it played, so.
I do too. So even though I had like hesitations, I ultimately was appreciative of how it ended up. I did write down, this is the Chinese finger trap again, because we have now had multiple episodes where the solution is basically the Chinese finger trap solution.
I don't, like, what are the other examples? I can't remember.
So they had the episode with the literal Chinese finger trap. They first illustrated it. They had the other one where the Enterprise was like above that big whirlpool and they kept trying to escape from it and they couldn't. And they just said like, give in and fly through it. Like they've done this a few times. And it's just like, okay, I get the Chinese finger trap thing. It's kind of clever and fun, but how many times are you going to do it in one show?
I actually liked the way that they focused on Geordi puzzling through all of it. There were a couple of places where it felt like he was given a convenient answer, but it wasn't. I mean, it ended up being something that, I mean, it was realistic in the sense that you would think, oh, well, this is the theory. You just let the computer handle it. And he worked through the simulations and didn't come to the conclusion. They could have easily just said, oh, he was right. It just requires a leap of faith and let's rely on the computer and let's go. It wasn't quite that simple.
I wrote that there's a lot of math in this episode, and there are a lot of random numbers thrown out. I asked a couple weeks ago, like, what's Mark 2.18? This was a lot of like, it's 17%. We're up 13%, but we're down 4% on this. So it's like very precise numbers, a lot of numbers. But I did like that they were using, in theory, math and science and engineering to solve the problem, even though it was all just made up, thrown out numbers.
Right. No, I mean, that kind of thing didn't even register with me. It was more, there's something about the way that they're presenting the way the technology was working, and they were doing it in a detailed enough way that it seemed plausible to me. Like just like out of reach of it being something. Oh yeah, certainly that is just like a car or something. But it felt like they were giving internally consistent explanation for how the tech was working.
It made you believe in their reality.
Yes. So I mean, I could accept that the parts interlocked in that way and they worked in that way, and this would logically follow from this, and I liked that part of it. So to Jimmy's point about it being like the Chinese finger trap, it felt more detailed than just saying, oh, we have to give in and just turn it off. It was the reason why they needed the computer to do 1,000 calculations per second or adjustments per second. The reason why they needed that was because of all the other automated systems that they had to account for. So the idea was to, if you could reduce all the variables down to the simple propellers, you could then have a human just feel and move with it instead of having to control everything at once, which I thought was a good way of looking at it.
That is a great point, Keith. I like that a lot. I hadn't really thought about that. at the end when Geordi's saying goodbye to Leah, which he's going to come back to her program. But anyway, like even if it's never establishing canon, he's spending lots of time in there. Yeah. But he's saying goodbye, and she's like, well, you'll see me every time you look at the engine and everything. And I'm like, they're going to catch Geordi screwing the engine, aren't they?
Oh.
That's all I could think. Fashion.
I have a comment on that.
Troy's dress this week.
Yeah, the teal was back, which was great to see, the return of teal. I also thought, and this is the Seinfeld part of this episode, I thought Leia's hair was very early Elaine on Seinfeld.
Yeah, that's
very, there's a lot going on, and how does that even work? And you just start tying things together.
It reminded me of when people, like even now, when they want to do like period piece hair of like the conservative woman of Victorian, I can think of like whatever the period is called.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
It was definitely, to keep with the Seinfeld thing, it was definitely, describe who are you trying to find? She's got a really flat face and a really big head of hair. It's something a bird would get caught in. It looks like, it would crash right into it.
Well, I just thought a way to look at it. It's sort of like the hair equivalent of that trope that they would always do in like, especially like 80s kids things. If a child was like playing an old man, they would suddenly have that accent out of nowhere where they're, it's not like an older version of their voice.
Right.
Yeah.
So anybody older than this time period has to be this.
They mentioned a Bechdel processor, which I was like, oh, is this a reference? But even then, it
did not pass the Bechdel test. So.
It did not. It was Leia talking to Geordi. I did like that at one point there's a TOS reference when Picard's flying the Enterprise through the debris field. They're like, he's using its gravity to slingshot past. I'm like, yeah, that's TOS. Even though it's one of probably our least favorite episode of TOS. It's the
when they got back in time, just like that. Just a little.
Yeah. They used it in Voyage Home too, though. So.
I like the spin maneuver they did with it, visually at least.
Yeah, that looked really good, actually. And as much as, we bet on how broad Geordi's thing was from the first scene and some of his early stuff with Leia, I thought the very last scene and the Guinan scene too, once they started really engaging, he did some really good, as opposed to the broad, and I'm not blaming LeVar Burton, I'm blaming the writing, the broad kind of awkward, like, oh, I'm awkward. I thought in the Guinan scene, and then as we got closer to the end of this episode, and especially the very end, I thought it was really great, subtle, awkward acting. And that was like, that's a real person. That's how a real person acts awkward, especially in a person who is an adult. And, and it made me think of, there was the episode where I think it was the Dauphine, maybe, where Wesley's in love with the girl, and he's like, teenagers and all their hormones. It's like, so it seems like he talked in that episode like he knew all about it, and he's like, I know how this works. But in this episode, up until the last scene and parts of the Guinan scene, he was worse than Wesley. But I said all that just to say I love that last scene.
LeVar Burton did a great job, and I think part of my uncomfortableness is I see some parts of myself I don't like in him in this episode, which could be a testament to how realistic and well developed the character is. And yet, obviously, turns me off because it's like, me too. Yeah.
I don't know if it's a nerd thing, us men in general, but I feel like I think we've all been through that period of time.
Yeah.
At some point, and it's like is it different? So even with Geordi being older than Wesley and being able to speak to some things that have happened, it's like the difference between being completely inexperienced and maybe being in a slump, or just having sparse, just something. And
he's been too focused on his work and hasn't had romantic.
It could be that, but I mean, I think that sometimes intellectually you can see certain kinds of things that just from getting to a certain age that you wouldn't necessarily be able to apply to your own life and just technique as far as dealing with a woman in real life or in practical experience for Geordi in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess to that extent, when I think of 1989 me, how inexperienced, stupid, unenlightened I was then, it makes sense that I would have been like, this guy's awesome. I love this story. It's so sweet. I would have done the same thing. And I was like, what?
I was 6 and I had girlfriends throughout elementary school. So
yeah,
I did not.
Just nothing after elementary school for a long time.
What computer program would you make out with?
Well, I mean, like of our female friends, if we had to make a program, you're saying? Or...
Oh, we're not naming female celebrities.
Well, originally my thought was what computer program, and then now I made it to I just make a computer program out of Susan Sarandon, whether it's 1973, 1980, 1990, 2020, it'd be Susan Sarandon. It would be great. But originally my thought was, would it be
PowerPoint?
Yeah, would it be would it be Solitaire?
PowerPoint's pretty sexy.
The original Solitaire program.
I will say, when my wife and I watched Her, the Joaquin Phoenix movie.
Oh yeah,
I forgot to bring that up. I haven't seen it yet.
We left there and we both agreed that yes, I would be the type of guy that fell in love with the computer voice.
Okay, yeah, there's. I think
it's ScarJo. So
I think there was something about the audio only portion of that did seem very Her-ish. The concept of that felt like something like that was going on here, which I think maybe got muddied in the fact that you can suddenly see it, and as you said, it was a likeness of an actual person within the storyline. Would the computer, especially the holodeck computer, really be able to distinguish between your intent when they create something like this? It knows the purpose that most people are usually using it for, so it would make this. Geordi says, "I need this thing to be a little bit more fleshed out. Give it some personality. Do this so it can help me think through these things." Would the holodeck go, okay, and have the equivalent of like Google Safe Search on? Or would it just say, here's a full-blown person, and it is like by default programmed to be a little bit more romantic or something? Well, I guess that's an exonerating argument I'm giving for Geordi's defense, in the sense that maybe he didn't mean to make a sex bot out of this historical figure, but it kind of is inherent in the holodeck programming.
If you could make a sex bot out of a historical figure, who would it be?
Obviously, Eleanor Roosevelt. Obviously.
Well, Susan Sarandon, of course. I mean,
I wouldn't consider her historical because she's still alive.
Catherine the Great.
Ooh, that's a good one. You have an alternate episode?
Instead of the ship being in trouble and all that, it's just Geordi. Just a romantic comedy of Geordi on the holodeck. Him just failing. And it's not even him with Leia. It's just the continued, the beach thing.
Oh, different dates on the beach.
Yeah. And then he programs in a buddy that's there to talk him through it. The buddy in every movie. So,
Cyrano.
Yeah. You know what? Actually, this would be an even better episode. He programs it would be like a Woody Allen one. It'd be more like a teen romantic comedy. It'd be like a 22nd century comedy, romantic comedy, whatever that would be. So it would just be different variations. And he would strike out in everyone. And then finally, he's like, I'm getting out of the holodeck. And he meets a real girl. And then there's a real connection. And there you go.
My alternate episode is Geordi created the simulation of the Enterprise, but he's living in the modern day. And he was just trying to escape his reality.
Oh, that's a good one.
Even in his simulation, he couldn't get a girl.
That's a good one, too.
That's nice.
I liked it in both of ours. Well, Geordi finally gets a girl in mine, but yeah, that's awesome.
Somewhat serious question about that. Do you think that would have been less uncomfortable if the episode had really just been about him trying to date rather than this coming up during a crisis? Him going through a series of dates in a hologram and not being able to get it, and then just maybe having this computer figure that he admires in some way kind of.
Yeah, I would rather watch it. I think. And I get these arguments about playwriting and anything else too, where people are like, well, there's got to be a conflict. Does there? I mean, does there have to be that kind of conflict? So like last week in The Bonding, if it'd just been, we're talking about the grief and dealing with this, I would have loved that for an hour. Yeah. You know what? Yeah. Show me Geordi dating for an hour. Yeah. I'd rather have that than this other, because the actual I was going to call it Booby Trap. It was kind of interesting, but like Jimmy said, we kind of already did this. It wasn't, I didn't think it was great. I thought it was okay.
It was nice to have the backdrop of them working on something together that had some value or stake to it. However, yeah, I think one of the things that, I guess answering my own question, one of the things that made it feel that awkward was the impropriety of the, it just, there's something serious he needs to be doing, and it makes it feel, I guess, a little creepier that he's being distracted by this in that moment, rather than just fleshing him out as a human being over the entire episode.
Yeah. Well, and I'm trying to think, because the Orville gets heavily into the dating. Obviously, the captain and his ex-wife are the captain co-captain. But I feel like sometimes it's just these guys are dating people, all the other crew members, but a lot of it ends up playing into gets into the conflict. You know, when he dated the Charlize Theron character, when his ex Adrian Palicki was dating the teacher, that didn't become the conflict of an episode. That became an ongoing thing and created these other conflicts. So, which again, that probably just adds to why I really like the Orville. It's like, oh, these guys are dating like they're in high school and they're on a starship. This is great.
Yeah, so, it doesn't necessarily make them always likable at every moment, but it doesn't feel as jarring. I think that's what it is. It's they're already in a position where you're thinking of them as being full ordinary people. They're relatable in a way, as opposed to
they're showing more of the hookups we talk about that just get alluded to in TNG. They're getting deeper into it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Scale of 1 to 10, how annoying was Wesley?
I give him a 1.
1? I'm trying to remember what he was doing in this. I mean, other than helming and just...
Yeah, no, nothing. Yeah. And I kind of feel bad that this week was a 1 and last week was a 1. I feel like there should be some way to distinguish episodes he was really great in. Right. Versus episodes he had nothing in.
Can we go
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, not being annoyed isn't necessarily a metric, is it? I enjoyed even what little he did in this, in the sense of just it required subtlety, and that's what it was just like this little. I'm a little disappointed that I'm not doing this, but it's there momentarily, gone immediately. This is an order. I understand. I'm up. I'm gone. I appreciate being called back. Yes,
he's settled into being a member of the crew in a way he wasn't early on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was your annoyance?
Ooh,
mine was Geordi's date at the beginning. I thought, you can be not having a good time, and now I'm that guy who's like, you can act like you're having a good time.
You don't have to act like you're having a good time. Just don't act miserable.
Yeah, that's fair. And,
he was rude.
I had plenty of dates in my life that just they went along with it. They were like,
no, she was just a downright jerk, in my opinion.
Yeah, I thought so too.
With you, Steven, I'm choosing her as well.
Which usually that actress isn't. That's what was really off-putting. Was like she's usually great, but yeah.
I was trying to think that through too, actually, whether or not she was behaving in a way you would expect. I mean, certainly to get across the point of what was going on, they had to give us some body language and so on. But my take on it, I think at first was just that there wasn't enough going on. Geordi had been failing to make proper conversation, or maybe she had, or whatever.
There were several empty cups. They'd been there a while.
Yeah, they just didn't have anything to talk about, and Geordi kept trying to kind of artificially move the thing, the date forward. And really, what could you expect her to do under those circumstances?
Still a kinder way to get out of that.
Yeah.
Seems like it. Yeah. I can. Yeah, is the backstory that he's just been hounding her. She's like, all right. She's the waitress on It's Always Sunny. It's
man!
Well, I mean, they said somebody mentioned you were supposed to be on a big date.
That's right.
Yeah. So Keith, your annoyance?
Oh, man! I mean, it's kind of slim pickings as far as that goes. I mean,
you can pick Geordi.
I could. I don't want to do it. I mean, that's a valid choice, though, isn't it?
It's a very valid choice, but I wanted to give him a break.
I think that's what it is. I think going through it and me wanting to defend him, I feel bad, but
that's kind of where I landed. It's like I didn't want to pile on to Geordi.
I guess I'll have to do it. I mean, just something about that the opening bits. I'll give it to him from that. I mean, I think he made up for it eventually in certain ways, and that's certainly debatable. But I think the early performance is good enough to make him the annoying character.
Are we all choosing Leah as our crush?
I am. Yeah, I'm gonna give up Patches.
The scientist, yeah.
Yeah.
I was once she got going in the whole just.
That's a very easy choice.
I enjoyed the banter. I enjoyed the knowledgeableness of it, and just
Yeah, and I guess I'm picking her the person rather than the computer program. I guess.
The computer program, once she got personality.
Well, the fact that what she accomplished in her career is obviously interesting. But
we didn't meet
you're
the
right.
real her.
The personality was better. Yeah, so that combo.
I think the computer said it had like a 9% inaccuracy rate too. So
that's right. Yeah, which is, again, that was another one of those random numbers that was thrown out.
It was like 9.37 or something.
She'll be a bit different when we meet her for real.
Well, those beat out Patches for me, but it was close.
You may be surprised based on my comments for this episode, but I want to rank it near the top.
Hmm.
Now that you say it, I guess I am surprised. Man, I had a good time with it and everything. It's just, are you joking? Wait a minute.
No, I'm not joking. I actually do like this episode.
Huh.
Despite my complaints, because I do feel like a lot of my complaints are modern lens that would not really have been anticipated, and I think they were trying to tell a sweet story, and like I said, my personal annoyances at myself get in the way of fully enjoying.
I feel like our conversations about those things are separate from the episode itself. I mean, as far as whether the episode was any good.
I love Leah. I like the puzzle. I like Jordy being an engineer.
Yeah.
So who watches The Watchers?
I'd probably end up more in the middle. So where are we? Episode 7? Episode 6?
This is episode 6. Who watches The Watchers?
It's number 4.
Who watches The Watchers is number 1. The Proto-Romulans. Or Proto-Vulcans.
I know. I'd go below.
That's actually tough. What's under that again?
The Survivors, the X-Bridges.
I think I like it more than that.
I'm with Keith. I like it more than Survivors. Yeah. I'm divided on whether it should be 1 or 2.
That's crazy. I wouldn't have expected that going into this, especially with just, again, the comments at the beginning.
I'm inclined to put it number 2, but I like it.
Yeah, I think I'm the outlier this week, but because I'd go lower. But
you'd go lower than the X-Bridges?
It should be 2 then. I mean, I think it should already be 2 at that point because, I mean,
I think
I'm already torn, but I mean, if you're pulling it lower than that already, so.
But
I was going to put it number 2. So
for me right now, it's a lot of splitting hairs right now. It's like all splitting hairs for these to an extent.
For you, Steven, would you go below the Instance of Command?
Yeah, I could go either way with that. So
it's almost like the reverse, if you think.
It'd be 3 or 4. It'd be right there. Yeah, I could go either way with those.
Yeah, I think it's definitely better than the Bonding or Evolution.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll put it number 2 of 6.
Yeah.
Solo. Next week, The Enemy. LaForge, it's another Geordi heavy episode. LaForge gets left behind on a storm-plagued planet when the rest of his team encounters a Romulan warrior. And I was scrolling through the longest hypnosis. It looks like there's some pretty cool things in here. Stuff with Worf and his parents' deaths and everything.
You guys know I love Romulans, but I've also been very disappointed so far. So.
There's some really good Romulan stuff coming up in TNG. Okay. I can't remember if this is one of those, but there is some really good Romulan stuff.
Well, they have you trapped in a cycle of abuse right there. It's just like that's how they keep you wanting more.
Joanne Linville, patron saint, pray for us.
Until then, live long.
Watch out for booby traps. They're still out there. We don't use that term a lot, but keep your eyes open for them.
And make a simulation of Joanne Linville. That's
the booby trap Steven wants.
Yep, done.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?